Welcome to the Two Bros Lit podcast, where we are watching Brent right now light his cigar. I have a special cigar that I'm going to talk about today. I'm not bringing it into I'm not bringing it into the camera. This week we are reading. I want to know what you're smoking too. Actually, this week. No, you're fine. Go ahead. I don't want you to respond to the next statement that I'm going to make. You're so funny. Stop it. I can't hear you. This week, we are reading a book that I've been extremely excited to read. And I think this is the most excited. This is the book that I've been most excited to read for a very long time. And then book that we're going to be reading next, I'm very excited to read about too, which is The 48 Laws of Power. Holy mackerel, that's a massive book, dude. It's almost 500 pages. Okay, this is what I didn't want you to respond to. I wanted you to hold your thoughts. You're so funny. The people on the podcast can't see what you're doing. So if you're listening on the podcast, you have to go. You stop it.
You told me not to say anything.
No. Not to say anything after I make the statement. And you're going to understand.
All right, go.
Whenever I say it. So this is introduction. Whenever I'm watching political pundits on TV, oftentimes people will claim that America is a Christian nation, right? And the understanding that we were founded on Christian principles, and like I understand that argument. It's a little weak considering the majority of the writers of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were deists. We're not going to go there, but point being, a claim that is often made by those who are more supportive of the fact that America is a quote-unquote Christian nation is that we use the Bible as our basis for creating and maintaining law and order in society. And when someone says we don't need the Bible in order to be a law-abiding and orderly society and citizenry, the response often is, well, what book do you recommend? I mean, the Bible is the best that there is. Today, I'm going to claim something that some would consider a bit blasphemous. It's not intended to be blasphemous at all. It's just intended to make a point. It's also not intended to degrade the value of the Bible. I think that its value is extremely high. There's a lot to learn from the Bible. I'm not suggesting that in any way it's a negative book in any way. But if we were to use a book to help us live as a moral and incorrupt society that would rival the Bible, and if I was asked the question, well, what book would you use in place of the Bible? I would have to say Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Let's get it. All right, now you can respond.
You know, it's funny because I have a topic here on the similarities of Stoicism versus Christianity and the differences between philosophy and religion. And this has been a kind of something that was triggered. We talked a little bit about on Thursday about this, but I agree with you. I think the reason why the Bible has become that book that a lot of people have aligned their life with is because it teaches a lot of the similar things that Meditations teaches, and Christianity is very similar to Stoicism. Yep. But when you look at Marcus Aurelius's day, I think he was born 150 years after the birth of Christ, or somewhere around that time frame. It's because back in the day, religion did not have literature for people to read and to live by. And in fact, the common people couldn't read in the Latin or couldn't read in the Greek, the two languages that were spoken in Marcus Aurelius's day. That was only reserved for the higher society. So they couldn't even read anyway. And so because Christianity had no book that was translated and there was no school of thought, then it didn't really catch on until I'm assuming, and you probably know better than me, but around maybe 12, 13, 1400, when literature started becoming more apt of a little bit before the printing press, right? So Christianity did not have these written doctrines, whereas Stoicism had been a way of life and these schools of thought for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so that was intriguing to me because I never really thought about it from that perspective, that Stoicism is a much earlier thought and a way of life or a philosophy of life than Christianity is. And that was just something that I was pondering this whole week. And it's funny that you said that if there was another book besides the Bible that you could govern your life by, then it would be Meditations by Marcus Aurelius.
So I would challenge that thought only from the perspective that the Old Testament was written thousands of years before philosophical thought or Stoicism came into being. But if you're looking at the New Testament, and there is a sect of Christianity that sees the issues that the Old Testament brings up, like there are laws in the Old Testament and ways of behaving that are just questionable. So, for example, there's a law in the Old Testament that if a brother dies and they are childless,
Yep. I got you.
and me and Megan have talked about this before, and I was like, I'm so thankful that Brent and Katie have had a kid and that we're not living in the times of the Old Testament.
So what was that rule then, Brian? So if people don't know what that rule is, what is it?
Because if Katie and Brent had not had a child and we were in Old Testament times and Brent had died due to an accident, then I am supposed to go into the bedroom with Katie so that a child can be born to be raised in honor of my brother.
What's that mean? I don't know what that means, Daddy.
So there's
It's
lots
crazy,
of
right?
stuff like that, which
Right,
is just
right.
like, what? So because of those issues, and I could name a bunch of them in the Old Testament, ways that people behaved and justified behavior with the Old Testament. Now, there are a lot of great principles as well, which is the reason why modern Christianity includes it in their current scriptures. But there is a certain sect of Christianity that only recognizes the New Testament as the book that they follow for life principles, and they exclude the Old Testament, similar to how the Jewish people exclude the New Testament. So Jewish people, the Jewish religion, does not recognize the New Testament as scripture. It only recognizes the Old Testament and its traditions, its ritual, all of that. That's all that they recognize as scripture. You okay?
Yeah, the neighbors are loud.
They are. Well, it's okay. It's okay.
Oh, it's like yeah. But even with Stoicism and with these philosophical schools of thought and even Christianity, people still pick and choose what they're going to follow and what they're not, because we're all made different. We're all made as human beings to have a different. I think Stoicism is really applicable to controlling your mind and really tests your mind's resolve. I think any school of thought, that's why they call it schools of thought, because it tests what you think. And you're not going to believe everything that Marcus Aurelius said about life's brevity or the quickness of death as it comes upon us, or different things that he wrote about. We can pick and choose what we want to live by. I think it's the same thing with any school of thought, religion, Bible included. Even the most strict religious Christians or people who follow the Bible, even they too only pick and choose what they want to live by. They don't follow the Bible for everything that it says. And the same thing with people who follow Stoicism or any school of thought or any philosophy. They pick and choose what they want to live by. And that's also something to think about too.
So before we continue, and I have a leading phrase that will get us right back into this conversation, but first I want to talk about the cigar that I'm smoking, if that's okay.
Ooh, go ahead.
So for my birthday, my wife got me a Padron 1964 anniversary edition cigar, and it is freaking amazing. So thank you, Megan. I appreciate it. It is extremely good. One of
Do
the
you,
best cigars I've ever smoked in my life.
just so you know, Brian, I had bought you a 6-pack sampler of Padron. And because I told you I was going to buy you some cigars, but I had to verify my ID online. And because
Right?
my address is from Guam and my billing address is Germany, they're like, yep, you're lying to us. You're under 18. And I could not get you I think it was a 6-pack sampler of Padron. The 1964, the 1927, and the charge is still sitting on my credit card right now, so I'm waiting for them to take it off. But I like it though, man. Can I share what I'm smoking if you don't mind?
You know what do you know what I bought
Here,
you?
mine's not as
I
good.
bought you the unicorn cigar that is $5,000 per cigar. And I tried buying it, but then they wouldn't verify my license, but I was going to buy you a $5,000 cigar.
I have email confirmation.
But before you tell me what you're smoking, I got you something.
What did you get me?
And I want you to
I gotta
see
move my screen around
your
here.
face. I want to see your face.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, you ready? You know how I'm a big nerd? In fact, today I'm wearing my shiny
I
shirt.
have no idea what that is, man. I'm wearing a shirt I got out of the dirty clothes, so it's all good.
This is from Firefly. So Firefly is a nerd's dream paradise world.
Okay.
It's kind of a mix between Star Trek and Western civilization, like
Oh,
cowboys
cool.
and Indians.
Okay.
It only had 14 episodes. They had a movie called Serenity that came out a few years after. It's extremely massively popular, and recently they announced that they're coming out with an animated series 24 years after the original series was made.
Cool.
And so I
Okay.
found this shirt. This is like nerd. I'm a brown coat. Like this is nerd extremism, like to its core. But anyway, I know that you're not a nerd because you're super cool. You're the good.
Show me what
brother.
you got. I want to see it.
And so I got you this.
I love long away from people, dude. That's my shirt, man. That is my shirt. See, we're all nerds in some way. You know what I mean, dude? That's sick. Did you like custom make that, or you just find it?
No, I found it because there was a sale going on, and it wasn't $5,000. It was $6. There was a sale going on. Woot!
Thanks,
And
man.
it was $6 a shirt if you bought 3. So
Okay.
I actually ended up buying 6 shirts because I bought a shirt from my brother-in-law as
Okay.
well that I'm going to give
I
him
like
on
to
his
watch
birthday.
movies. I bet you bought his. I like to watch movies. I bet.
That's really interesting, but kind of. So it's a Hail Mary shirt, a Project Hail Mary shirt.
Cool. Okay.
Because he really liked that. And so I found it and I was like, oh, I really like that. So I got it for him. Anyway, your cigar. You're smoking a Perdomo Nicaraguan.
I am. It's a Maduro, and I smoked this cigar like 3 episodes ago. Loved it so much. It's so good. It's not like a Padron or a Davidoff, but it is so good. Like I think Perdomo is going to be my go-to because I've only been smoking when we shoot these episodes. So I kind of save my cigar for these episodes. But I did eat before we got on because last time I smoked this, we got off the episode or off recording, and I got super lethargic, kind of sick to my stomach because I'm a lightweight
Yep.
when it comes to cigars. And so I made sure I ate a full meal, got my water in me. I'm good to go. So what's that?
Yeah.
What's that catch-up phrase that you said that was going to get us right back on track?
Catch-up phrase. So Ryan Holiday in the foreword. And I want to take this book, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And this is the translation by Gregory Hayes, by the way. Excellent translation. And I do have a question for you about the translation. But first,
Okay.
Ryan Holiday in the foreword said, fight to be the person philosophy wants you to be. And I'm sure you wrote that down as
yes,
well.
I did. Yes.
Because that is so good. Because philosophy is deeper than just, we're thinking about the world and how we need to live within it. Like there are concrete steps and concrete ways to act that Marcus Aurelius talked about, especially related to Stoicism. He also said the right book at the right time is a powerful thing. And this book
we're gonna be
was
talking about the same things,
fantastic.
man. I love it.
fantastic. Literally, it's going to be in my top 5. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't confusing moments in the book, and I want to talk about that. There weren't books that I didn't really like within the book, because this book is broken up into 12 books inside of it. And so there were, for instance, book 9 and 10, I think it is. Yeah, books 9 and 10 that I was like, well, I mean, you might as well have thrown those out, because I didn't get anything out of those books.
Right.
But the
Yeah.
other ones, literally some of the best material
Yeah.
that I've ever read. So what do you think about the phrase, fight to be the person philosophy wants you to be, by Ryan Holiday?
Well, what is philosophy? And I think Marcus Aurelius in this book, he's trying to show that philosophy and you being the person that you're meant to be is through virtue, trying to practice all the virtues. And the four cardinal virtues that Stoicism speaks on, which is courage, discipline, justice, and wisdom, which is actually the last 4 books that Ryan Holiday wrote. This is how we're supposed to compare our life to courage, to discipline, to justice, to wisdom. But of course, there's other virtues out there like self-control, which I guess would be more self-discipline, or would be discipline, that we're supposed to live by. And when you go back to the Bible talks about, and I don't know if I'm too correct on this one, but talks about trying to live truth or trying to discover what the truth is. I think Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, stuff like this. We're trying to find truth. Right. And philosophy allows us to discover what that truth is, because we're trying to practice those virtues. And I had also written down this phrase, and I read in between books a couple of weeks ago, I read Musonius Rufus's book, That One Should Disdain Hardships. And he also talked about fighting for philosophy and trying to find these virtues. And so I researched what he said. And he said, what is the person that philosophy wants us to be? It wants us to be chaste, self-controlled, exercise restraint in pleasures, not to be a slave to desire, not to be contentious, not lavish in expense, not extravagant in dress, to control your temper, not to be overcome with grief, to be superior to an uncontrolled emotion of every kind. And I will add, more of what Marcus Aurelius wrote about was how to approach death without fear. And I think that's what philosophy as men wants us to be. Mostly self-controlled, controlling against our desires, against pleasure, exercising control over our mind and our reactions to other people. So I think that's what philosophy is trying to make us be as men, and that's what we should fight on a daily basis. And I think you see Marcus Aurelius in every single entry of this book fighting to be that type of person. Sometimes he doesn't know how to be that person. Sometimes he questions himself. Sometimes he berates himself. Sometimes he argues with himself. But you see that internal dialogue with himself on how he can be the person that philosophy wants him to be. What was your thoughts on that?
Well, so 2 thoughts on that. One of the things that I really like about meditations that I'm not as crazy about in the Bible is it feels like Marcus Aurelius is extremely forward on the fact that he got angry, that he had to resist the pleasures of the flesh, and the way that he says it. Now, granted, Paul in his writings does talk about his struggle with the flesh.
Right.
He does talk about his anger. He does talk about the allures of the flesh, like all of that. He does describe it. But to me, whenever I read the Bible, it's almost in more of an aloof way, rather than how Marcus Aurelius presents it, which is, I'm struggling with these problems right now.
Right.
These are not things that I used to struggle with, or these are not things that I struggle with every now and again. If we're being honest, we struggle with lust on a daily basis. We struggle with the desire for power on a daily basis. Yeah. We struggle for the desire of greed and selfishness and all of these things. Like, and again, in the Bible, I'm not saying the Bible's wrong. Paul does say these things. He does say we struggle on a daily basis. He does say things like, I am selfish, I am greedy. He does say all these things, but the way that it's presented is in a different perspective.
I think sorry, real quick. Or is it the way, not Paul, but is it the way current preachers and the way pastors in the past have tried to guilt you into following certain things? I don't know if that makes sense, but
It does, yeah. And I see your point. And I do think that the aloof perspective that's presented in churches today is very true. Like, I think that happens. But the second point that I wanted to make, that also Gregory Hayes brought up in his 50-page section before Meditations, is that something that's really important with Stoicism in particular and philosophy in general is the idea of the logos, Logos, which he even said in the opening portion that it's not really translatable. Like, the idea of the logos is something more of like, it's the breath of life. It's nature. It's living. It's, how do you describe living? Like the plants and the trees and the world and the order and the interconnectedness of it all. The word logos is used for that. And we know that Stoicism and Christianity were kind of coming up around the same time. You already mentioned that Marcus Aurelius was born 150 years or so after Christ's birth, after Jesus' birth. So we know that they knew of each other. In fact, Stoicism probably held a premier position over Christianity, so much so that John, in the Gospel of John 1, verse 1 and 2, it says, "In the beginning was the Word." And the Greek word that was used there is logos. And I'd never heard this before. And so when I read this, I thought, this makes so much sense. They're not talking about the Word of God, which was presented from the pulpit a lot. This, in fact, in the Greek, the word logos is used, like in the Greek. So if you go to a Textus Receptus, or you go to a Westcott and Hort text, which uses copies of the Bible that's been passed down through the centuries to make the translation that we have today, the word that's used there is logos. It's not talking about the Word of God. It's actually making direct reference to the system of Stoicism that they talk about. The word, or the logos, is the system of being. So if you look at it from that perspective, even John is addressing Stoicism and Stoicist thought back in the day when he wrote the Gospel of John. And when you quote that verse, I actually memorized it. That was one of the passages. I memorized so many passages growing up. But in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was the Logos. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things that were made by him was made. And without him was not anything made that was made. Point being, he was saying that the world structure, the world system, how the world is ordered was with God. In fact, the order of the world is God. The same, the order of the world, what Stoicists look at as the prima facie of living, was in the beginning with God. Because Christianity believes that God supersedes the Logos. And I think that's where the difference comes in Christianity and Stoicism, is that while the Logos, which is the order of everything, the reason that we live our life, the reason that we shouldn't fear death, the reason that this book was written is because of the Logos. The reason we shouldn't fret or worry is because the Logos will happen, almost comparing itself to Calvinism in Christianity and predestination. But Christianity says, yes, we recognize the Logos and the order of things, the order of the universe, the order of nature, but our God is above that. And he mentions that Marcus Aurelius probably knew about Christians, but only from the perspective that Christians were very vocal in saying, our God, our system is above and better than your system. And so they looked at Christians not because of their false religion or because of the fact that they weren't willing to believe in gods, but because they said, look, you have your system of laws and orders and, you know, all of this that happens in your logos. Well, our God not only is your logos, our God is above your logos, which means that anything that we say that our God says is better than you. So if our God says that we need to rise up and take down your logos, then that's completely fine. So it was looked at almost as a military threat, or it was looked at as a rebellious group of people who were not willing to follow Roman law. And that was the reason for the persecution of Christians, not necessarily the persecution of their religion. I found that separation because we'd always heard that Christians were tortured, they were persecuted, and granted, a lot of them probably were. Like, I'm not saying that, but it wasn't necessarily a top-down order or a top-down issue. Christianity was looked as something almost as if somebody's martyred for their beliefs or for their faith, you have this upswelling of people to support that martyr. Or I would say currently, a good representation would be ICE. So right now, and it's going down more, but ICE is going out there and is doing things that's questionable, right? Ryan Holiday himself has posted about it. Like, we need to have due process of the law. We need to make sure that people have the right to stand before their accusers in a court of law, like all of that. There are people who maybe don't know what they believe. Maybe they don't know what's right regarding immigration, but what they do know is they see a cause and they see a way to rebel against the ruling class of society. And so they are attaching themselves to this cause, not necessarily because they disagree with ICE, but because they want to rebel against the head of the current American world, which is Donald Trump. So that's the same way that I think they kind of looked at Christians and how people attached themselves to Christianity because it was the current prevailing thought to the rebellion of the current elite ruling status. That's kind of how I looked at it.
You know, you just spoke of history. Well, first of all, you just spoke of history over a 2,000 year period. You spoke on from Jesus' birth to ICE, which is current and relevant today.
Right.
And I think we could stay, honestly, I told you on Thursday, we could either talk 30 minutes about this book or 3 hours, right? We could literally
Right.
stay in Ryan Holiday's foreword of this book and in the introduction of this book and talk for 3 hours without mentioning one single phrase from Marcus Aurelius and talk about things that are relevant today. Because even in Ryan Holiday's foreword, he said, as unrelatable as antiquity may seem, human beings remain the same. And you just bring in ICE just now and relating that to how the Christians might have felt, or how the Stoics or whatever school of thought might have felt towards the Christians. We all have been going through these differences of opinions, of politics, of religion, since antiquity. And in fact, if you want to talk about this war in Iran, those battles are, you might say it's over oil, or it might be over nuclear weapons, but the fact of the matter is these wars have been going on ever since. Because, since antiquity, these battles have been going on. And even in Marcus Aurelius's day, he was up in Germania fighting for decades. He was in modern day Turkey fighting. Like, these battles have been going on. But this is what makes meditation so relevant today, is because human beings, we're the same people today than that they were back in Marcus Aurelius's time. So, for instance, I'm gonna give you 3 phrases that really stuck out to me in this book. The thing you think about determines the quality of your thoughts. Sounds like something somebody said maybe in the 70s. The second one, choose not to be harmed, or you won't feel harmed. Like, that sounds like modern day psychology and helping kids in school to get over being bullied by one of their classmates, which Marcus Aurelius said that back in probably 150 AD. How much more damage anger and grief do than the things that cause them? I mean, that could be right out of a church pamphlet on how to deal with your anger in the modern world. But all those things were said, 2,000 years ago.
Right.
Because, anyway, I think that's why meditations and philosophy is making a comeback today, is because we haven't changed. Like, we have different inputs, but the way we're at the heart of our soul our souls have always been the same ever since. So I just thought it was intriguing. And when we talked on Thursday, I was hoping that you would go into more of your background on what you know about Christianity, because I think you studied it more than I did. But for you to see the similarities between Stoicism and philosophy to the Bible, like there's so many similarities there.
Massive similarities. And even Marcus Aurelius said, and I did not write down this quote, but it was something to the effect of wars, rumors of wars, and we've heard it,
Right.
It's happened in the past, it will happen again.
Yeah.
It will happen to the end of humanity.
Right.
Like it's something that's always going. So the war in Iran, for or against, I don't know the details of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I do keep up with it. I have an opinion on it, but my opinion is not important to the discussion.
Right.
Or point that it is happening. It is going to happen. If it's not Iran today, it's going to be in Iran tomorrow. If it's not Ukraine today, it's going to be a Ukraine tomorrow. Like these things have been passed down in history. And although it's discouraging to think that we're not getting better as a people and we're not continually finding ways to attack each other and continue finding ways to destroy and to kill, but it's part of our human nature. And Stoicism, and albeit Christianity, if Christianity was applied in the way that it should be, in my opinion, would be a reason to stop the foolishness. There are so many issues these days, and this could get political, and I'm not going to name a political cause, but dream up a political cause, something that's extremely controversial today.
Let's just use Trump.
Dream that up.
Just use Trump. Whether you're for him or against him.
So I'm not thinking of Trump. I'm thinking of something that's a cause, not a person. So I'm thinking of something like transgender rights, or I'm thinking of abortion, or I'm thinking of welfare support for the poor, or I'm thinking of voter rights. Like I'm thinking of those issues. Like there are reasons that people believe what they believe. There are reasons that people feel strongly about a cause versus other people who don't feel strongly about that cause and are opposed to that cause. But we fail to truly address the problem because we don't see the people.
That's right.
Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need to be a country of laws and order. I'm not saying that at all. But these wars keep happening because of the selfishness that we have. And one of the first statements that I wrote down is Marcus Aurelius said, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. Couldn't read that last word. And then after that, he wrote, why are they like this? It's because they don't know.
Right.
The reality is, even myself, like I can be such a selfish person sometimes that the way that I could be a better person in society is to understand that almost everybody that I deal with is going to be selfish. They have selfish motives, selfish reasons for the things that they do, the choices that they make. And part of the way that I can be a better person is by looking at them saying, wow, you're a really selfish person, but who are you? Why do you believe in this cause? Whatever it might be. And rather than me attacking the person because of the cause that they believe in, and this person has reasons for the cause that they believe in, like they have justification for the cause that they believe in. And we can debate the validity of abortion or transgender rights or whatever the cause may be of the day. But if we fail to see the person and understand that they are a selfish being, and then see past that and how we can work with them and how we can connect with them as people and how I can be a better person, like we're going to continually see the cycle of wars and people at each other's throats, but me becoming a better person, which is the things that I have learned. And the reason why this is literally one of the best books I've ever read is how I can help start that change. One of the things that I'm surprised, and I know why, but why was this book not introduced to us as teenagers?
It should be mandatory reading, right? In schools,
It should
be mandatory reading.
in Christian schools, because the thought and the philosophy are so close to what we are taught in the Bible. Now, the reason is because Marcus Aurelius talks about Zeus, he talks about honoring the gods,
Right.
and
He
of
worships
course,
other gods. Yeah.
the multiplicity of gods
Right.
is not something that Christianity believes in.
Right.
Christianity is monotheistic. But if you take that out, and that's only mentioned a couple of times, like it's not even that much. It's not even a main theme in the book.
Right.
He even, in some points, talks about pleasing God, God, singular. So in those points, he's not even talking about a plurality of gods. But why was this book not presented to us, to me, as a 16-year-old? Because if I had read this as a 16-year-old, the understanding that I would have had about life and the way to act and the appropriate decisions that I would need to make would have come to me much quicker than they did.
Yeah.
I'm 43 years old and just now learning the way to behave. It's almost as if I've been a child for 43 years up to this point, and I'm learning how anger, for example, is not an appropriate response when that was something that we learned growing up and almost justified, because in the Bible, the way that God shows his displeasure is through anger and wrath in the Old Testament towards other people. And the people of the Lord were justified in slaying the enemies of the Lord in anger because of the sinful things that they had done.
So
Me learning that that's not necessarily the best response would have been more rapidly learned if I had read something like this.
man, there's so much to unpack. I have a couple of thoughts. If you can just allow me to try to make sense of the couple of things that you said. So for one, the first thing you said, the first phrase that you brought up was the right book at the right time is a powerful thing. So he
Right.
goes on to talk about Heraclitus, which is a philosopher of his time. He said, we never step in the same river twice. Basically, he's talking about how the words of a book will never change, but every time you reread that book, you see the self-growth that you've had over the years, and every time you come back to that book, you can see how much you've grown or where your mind has changed. This is the fourth time that I've read Meditations, and it was like I had never read the book before. And I practically marked up the whole book with my pen, my highlighters, and all this, because I see how it's so applicable to. Yeah, I can see you got yours too.
I mean, lots, so much.
And it's so I think that we never step in the same river twice. And what that means is the flow of the river is constantly changing. The only thing that changes it is time, its currents, maybe has a rock or a tree in it. That's the only way it's going to change, which is kind of similar to the things that we go through. Like we change over time. And for instance, you talked about anger. I think it was also in book 1, he compares anger and he compares lust. And in the Bible, it talks about, like you just brought up, it talks about having righteous anger, and how anger is something that we respond to outside of us, whereas desire or pleasure or lust is something that happens inside of us.
Right.
So yes, in this case, desire, pleasure, lust is a lot worse than anger, because in the Bible you don't hear, and even in Meditations, you don't hear of righteous lust or righteous desire. And so those are the things that when I kind of put that together, like anger is, it's a quality that it's not a virtue, but when you compare that to desire or pleasure or lust, Marcus Aurelius in Meditations, he really goes off on how that disrupts all peace in your life, all stillness in your life. And, I wish I would have read not just about anger, but about desires, whether those desires are sex, money, fame, power, how that can disrupt everything in your life. Reading that at 16, at 19, rereading it at 25, rereading it at 30 would have been beneficial for me. And even Ryan Holiday, when he talks about this book on his social media, he talks about how he picked up this book when he was 19. And I just thought that was really profound. I'm just trying to make it make sense, because there's so many thoughts going through my head, and I'm not smart enough to communicate what I want to, because there's just so much there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I think the difference between Christianity and Stoicism, at least the Christianity that we learned, is in Christianity, there's a validity to righteous anger.
Right.
So somebody does something that I don't like or that I think is wrong, it's an appropriate response for me to have righteous anger towards them. When in Stoicism, it's never appropriate to get
Right.
angry. Now, there's recognition that you will get angry. That doesn't make it right. There either is and there isn't how you respond to a situation.
Right.
But anger is never appropriate.
Right.
There's no case for righteous anger, which is in direct contradiction to what the Bible says. For example, we have a God who commits righteous anger towards people who have rebelled against him. And then that concept is passed down through the judges and kings and people that God ordained. I mean, there's example after example. People had righteous anger towards those who were in authority, or righteous anger towards people who committed atrocities against God's word. And granted, the examples that are named, the killing of children, the killing of innocent people, like all of those, yes, absolute atrocities. We, in a sense, have a right. I say that because anger, there's no case where anger is appropriate. There's only response or no lack of response. We see a situation and we decide how we are going to respond to it, and the consequences of our response are what determine our actions. But there's never a case for righteous anger. But that being the point, we can look at the killing of innocents, or even in Iran or in Lebanon right now, where there have been massive amounts of innocent people who have been caught up in this war and killed. Right. Like, we can get angry about those things from a biblical perspective, and we are righteous in our anger. But from the perspective of Stoicism, anger is never an appropriate response in order for us to be satisfied with life. In order for us to be stoic, in order for us to be happy in life, we have to understand that the logos, the order of all things, the nature of all things, the way that it is, it just is, and we need to accept that. And when something happens, we decide how we will respond. And if that's, we don't believe, for example, that Trump is making the right decisions regarding Iran or regarding the court system or regarding ICE or whatever it may be, then our response is, I believe that he's making inappropriate decisions. Therefore, I will not vote for him or his predecessor in the next election. I will stand on a corner and I will hold up a sign that says that Trump is king and kings are whatever, right? I'm going to exercise my democratic right to voice my opinion on this topic. But getting angry is never an option. Right. Getting angry in Stoicism is not the way to have lasting satisfaction and lasting enjoyment in life. That's kind of how I look at it.
You know, there's a phrase to open up the introduction that is not what anybody said, but Plato in the Republic, he said, states will never be happy until rulers become philosophers or philosophers become rulers. And I chuckled, and I went to, at school, we have this AI program called Copilot. And I thought it'd be funny to, because I compared Trump to Marcus Aurelius. Now, I know we're not getting into politics, but what
I don't know how you do that.
So here's how I'm going with this. However you feel about Trump, Trump is no Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was known as the philosopher king. He was.
I think even people who like him would agree with that statement.
Marcus Aurelius was known as the last of the 5 good emperors. He was a philosophy king. Socrates also called philosophy or Stoicism statesmanlike and a royal discipline. And anybody who had mastered philosophy or had mastered Stoicism would become a statesman. And I'm going to reveal probably way too much than I should. Katie does not like Trump. She likes some of the things that he does, but the one thing that she cannot stand is he is not well spoken. He just isn't well spoken. And
what are you talking about?
And so it just rubs her the wrong way. But I tell her, I was like, man, you look back on history, some of the most important people or consequential people were not statesmen, and that's the reason why they could get things done, is because they did not follow status quo. They were not bought by money. They were, so they can make change in the way that they felt change should be made. So, right. So I was thinking, man, if states will never be happy until rulers become philosophers and philosophers become rulers. One, maybe you can answer this, maybe it's just a topic of debate, I don't know. Is there an ideal state that Plato talks about that's realistic and possible in the modern political scene? Is there a philosopher out there who could become a great president? Is there a president out there who was philosophical or well-spoken? So I was thinking, and the only two people I could come up with in the last maybe 150, 175 years was Abraham Lincoln, who Ryan Holiday talks about all the time, about him being more of a philosopher. And I thought about Martin Luther King Jr. and how these people were influencers of society, influencers of generations, but they were well-spoken, they were well-mannered, they knew exactly how to say things to sway public opinion, they were virtuous in many ways. So is it possible? Is what Plato said in the Republic possible in today's day and modern political scene? What do you think?
So the problem is, in order to become a powerhouse in politics, you have to do things that would disqualify you from being considered a philosopher. So there are people who are very well spoken, but their motives and intentions, I would have to say, have been revealed after they've had their presidency. And like, we're saying that Trump is not a statesman, he's not a philosopher, he's one of the worst examples of a human being just in his personal life. And I've heard even people who are staunch Republicans say, okay, yeah, we get that. When somebody says grab him by the, that's just a nasty thing to say. And that's a horrible person who would even think that way. And those people are separating his personal life and the fact that he is off the cuff and inappropriate a lot of the times. They're separating that from his ability to make political decisions and do what he thinks is right from a state perspective. But let's be clear, I'm not limiting this to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not the only one that we could not consider a philosopher. I would say President Obama would be close.
Okay.
Because he was from a perspective of doing the right thing, focusing on the people. But even him, like, he was named, what was it? Killer in chief or something like that, because he killed the most people by drone and bombs of anybody. Like, so even somebody who was as smooth and influential as Obama or Bill Clinton, like Bill Clinton was known as one of the smoothest talkers and one of the greatest statesmen of our time. But yet, recently, like, we found out he has a connection to Jeffrey Epstein.
Possible.
Like, really possible. Yeah. So it's, and I don't know. But the point is, I don't know. I think that Martin Luther King Jr., even he had things that he had done that were not becoming. But I think that he would be probably, in our modern day of history, probably one of the best examples, because we can't expect a person to be perfect.
Yeah, and even like JFK, it's well known that JFK, when he was assassinated, had meditations on his nightstand. But even JFK was sneaking mistresses into the White House, right? So, but that's what Stoicism and that's what meditations makes you question, is the ability for you to self-control your desires, to say no to pleasure, and not in a, I'm going to live in a tent and I'm going to get rid of all modern leisure and convenience.
Right.
But it makes you think about these things. And Stoicism, and to be a Stoic, is to first and foremost to master your mind. And I think when you take people like Trump and people who are in high power, they've never had to be in a position to where they've had to discipline themselves in these ways, not because of their power, but I think it just goes to show you how impactful Marcus Aurelius was in his, I'm sure he wasn't well liked by everybody, but how impactful he was as a philosopher king. And it's well known that he was well loved by his people for not only just the way he lived his life, but the way he thought. And of course, Meditations was not written for people to read, but to have a glimpse into the most powerful man in the world and seeing how he wrestled with his inner demons. I don't think that, taking Donald Trump for an example, I don't think he's wrestling with any of his inner demons. He probably most likely gives into them more often than not. So I just think it's funny how a book of philosophy, it can turn political, it can turn religious, it can turn any way, shape, or form, because I think we're all governed by this opportunity for us to master ourselves. And after reading Meditations, I think that Stoicism and that school of philosophy, pursuing virtue, might be the clearest way to become the best version of yourself. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And throughout the book, I'm reading my notes as you're talking. And one of the statements that he makes is the only thing that isn't worthless is to live this life out truthfully and rightly,
Yes.
and be patient with those who
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah. I wrote that one down too.
So people are going to do things that are nasty to us. And he, for example, says the best revenge is to not be like that. The best revenge is not to respond in kind. The best revenge is not to, and Jesus even talks about that, turning the other cheek.
Wow. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Right? Where when in the Old Testament, it was an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, yet the New Testament, which is why I think the Bible is a great resource. I think it's a great place to go, especially the New Testament, where we can take principles that the Bible teaches us to be better people, to control ourselves, to learn not to lust, to learn to control our mind, to learn not to desire the pleasures of the flesh. And if we do these things, then we will be a better person. But there's this constant emphasis on the logos. And I brought that up in the beginning because it's almost paralleled today to something like The Secret, or I think it was The Secret. That was the book that said, and it took it more from the perspective of, if you want something and you focus on it truly enough, then the universe will give it to you. That perspective. But to understand the universe from the perspective of everything that's going to happen has happened, it's happened for a reason, and I can choose to walk along with the universe as it happened, or I can fight against the universe as it happens. So the universe will bring, or God, or the Logos will bring people into my life that are going to challenge me. They're going to be nasty. They're going to be selfish. They're going to make decisions that benefit them and don't benefit me, and I can choose to respond to them in a way that is not stoic. I can choose to respond to them in a way that is extremely selfish, or I can choose to be stoic. I can choose to be a philosopher, to learn from books that I've read, and to become a better person because of it. I think one of the things about this book is if I had read it at 16, I would not necessarily have learned the things that I've learned reading it at 43. Like, I turned 43 while I'm reading this book, and I wonder what kind of person I would have been if I had not grown up the way that I had grown, if I had not gone through the experiences that I've gone through, understanding that in the Logos, everything happens for a reason. It's very ordered, it's very patterned. And this is the moment in time when I meant to pick up this book and read it and become a better
what
person.
did the book do for you? It made you think. That's the reason why somebody should read this book as young as they possibly can, because it's not that, I mean, yes, I'm glad we read it right now, and I think I found this book around 35 years old, but it's making you think about these deeper things about our human nature, about our desires, about how we think, about how we respond to other people's opinions, about the brevity of life, about our purpose, about being present. Like, Marcus Aurelius is constantly throwing these things into his book, and I think that it goes back to, this book makes you think at the deepest level, unother than any other book I've ever read. This book makes you think as deeply as possible. Got a question for you. You said in the Let Them episode that if you were to sum up all of Stoicism into one phrase or one word, it would have been what? Do you remember what you said?
Let them.
Did you go through, I'm just curious, if you wrote in your book, Did you ever write "let them" and "let me" in the book?
I did not. No. I mean, I thought about the book as I was reading
Yeah.
Meditations,
To
but like I didn't apply
no,
it.
but to
No.
me, like there's probably 10 different things that he would write about. For instance, because I have written here on book 4, point 18, the tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say or they think or they do, only what you do. And I wrote down, let them, let me, like the
Yeah, yeah,
concept
yeah.
of the simplicity of not caring about what other people think, and tying this book into a book that we previously read that is not a Ryan Holiday book. Could it be that everything that you read comes back to this book and to how this book magnifies not only the depravity of our human nature and how to combat our human nature, but it gives you the answers on how to do that. And I think every entry that that Marcus Aurelius has put into Meditations is that it is a open window, if you want to say, into what every single human being is thinking and what they go through on a daily basis, no matter if it was back in antiquity or if it is in the year 2026. This is how we think. This is how every man is geared towards not giving into their pleasure. Every man is geared towards not trying to follow fame or to not find satisfaction in money or in power. And Marcus Aurelius had all of that, but this whole book was written to question why we do that. And I think that that's the biggest thing about this book. It makes you think at the deepest level that you can possibly think about yourself, your place in the world, how you can make it better, and how you can make yourself better.
Yeah. So, for example, related to let them, he wrote in book 11, someone despises me. That's their problem. Be patient and cheerful with everyone. Or he also said, it never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own. Like, so let them is throughout the book. Like it's a very simple way of saying it, but yeah, I definitely see how it applied for sure.
You love my favorite book. Let's go.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it as far as impact, like it had a massive impact.
Yeah. Well, was there a phrase or an entry that he wrote that made you have to go back and read it multiple times? Was there something like that that really stuck out to you?
So the most impactful phrase in the book was the one that I read already in the very beginning. So it was, let me find it. Sorry, I'm going through my notes. Where he said, when you wake up in the morning, tell yourself the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. And the example that I immediately thought of is driving. When we drive, people can be so selfish or they don't think in an orderly fashion. And that just pisses me off sometimes. So, for example, one thing that I love about Germany is they have a very ordered way of the methods that you're supposed to use to drive. So if you're going to pass a car, and I love the Autobahn because if you pass a car, you get up to speed, you get around the car, you get over to the right. You let the people who want to go faster go around you. There's no judgment on, oh, you want to go faster than me because you think you're better than me. Like there's none of that in Germany.
You're in a Porsche, so you think you're better
than me. I mean, there's none of that. People don't care. If you're a Porsche, you want to go 120 kilometers an hour.
Well, that's only 75, but yeah, for sure. 120 miles per hour.
150 kilometers an hour. Right. Point being, I'm trying to use my European knowledge to appear impressive because I care more about myself than I do other people. But like driving in America is just, it's the greatest example of selfishness, surliness, ungrateful, arrogance, dishonesty. where the people who want to go faster than the people who are going slower will act like jerks by cutting people off and going around and creating the roads unsafe for everybody else. But the people who want the people who are faster to go slower, they are also equally arrogant in driving in the left lane and slowing down on purpose and speeding up to get next to a car so that you can't go around them, and then driving super slow in that like on both sides. American society and its arrogance and its surliness and its selfishness is no more better described and better represented than in our American roads. And so that's the first thing that I need to think, especially, and I've gotten so much better to the point that I literally try to think stoicism as I'm driving. And for instance, the slow people, they always say, why are you going faster? So you're only going to get there for 2 minutes quicker. Who cares about that 2 minutes? And for me, it's like, it's not about the 2 minutes. It's about the fact that you're being a complete butt by driving in the left-hand lane, trying to make me drive slower.
Right.
And we all know as Americans, nobody's going to tell us what to do, right? Especially you not driving slow in the left-hand lane. You can't go faster than me, right? Or there's somebody who's driving in the middle lane, and I always use my... what's it called? Constant speed. I always use my
cruise control.
My brain's not working. My cruise control. I always use my cruise control. Always. I always put it on 9 miles an hour over the speed limit, whatever it is. Every time. You know me. You know Brian. You know how my brain works. I drive that way for a specific reason because we have a brother who's a police officer, and he has made the statement that it's unlikely, extremely unlikely, that any police officer will pull you over for going 9 miles an hour over the speed limit. Also, there's the fact that in the state of North Carolina, there's no points or anything associated with getting a ticket for 9 miles an hour or less over the speed limit. There's nothing. It starts at 10 miles an hour. So for that reason, I drive my cruise control everywhere, 9 miles an hour over. We're in city limits. Speed limit's 35. I drive at 44 with the cruise on. So I'm driving down the road with my cruise on. There's a car that's in the middle, and I get over to pass it in the left-hand lane, and they speed up. Typically, if they speed up enough, then I'm just going to get back over to the right-hand lane. And then they slow down again. And then I get back over to the left-hand lane, and I go to pass them, and then they speed up. My whole point to saying all this is I see the surliness, the selfishness, the way that people act and how people drive. And that is a prima facie, that is the epitome of me getting to practice my stoicism on a daily basis and how I drive and learning that.
No, man, I'm here. I'm absorbing everything you say because you're like, we're putting thought into how we live our lives, and that's the power of a book. It's giving you this power to think about how you're reacting to people, to human beings that you can't even control. And I keep going back, and it's probably ad nauseum, but I keep going back to how this book makes you think on a deeper level, probably a level that I don't think this deeply on any other book that I read. Maybe on Ryan Holiday's books, like, because it's stoic in its theme. So I wanted to run something by you because I'm sure you have an opinion on this. On one of my walks this week, I was thinking through the phrase, and again, it's about how we think. And I don't know where I read this from, but I had written down in my journal. But the phrase or the statement goes like this: are we really free in our doing if we're not free in our thinking? So going back to what you're talking about with your cruise control and trying to relate to other people, because you've thought about how you're going to respond to drivers on the road, that has all came about because you have thought about this from a stoic perspective. Now, with that being said, I want to ask you a question and just see what you think about this. In our current day, what is the one thing that influences our thinking more than anything else? What is that in your opinion?
Social media.
I think
100%.
so too. And part of my ponderings this week is, in the modern world, I believe it's getting harder and harder to think on what we believe and think about the bigger issues, because social media or it's propaganda on the news, whether you're watching Fox News, CNN, or whatever news things.
You mean the Communist News Network?
According to RK, right? and you think about it, people are now called influencers. And we live in this influencer era where we take what people say on social media or on the news and we turn that into what we think. And I don't know where I read this at as well, but I had written it down. But the agenda of the news or the agenda of the influencers is to dismiss what you think and is trying to put what they think into you. So, for instance, if you watch the news, whether you watch Fox or CNN, they're going to give you a spin or propaganda based upon what they want to promote. When was the last time that we really sat back and thought deeply? Let's just take politics, for example, on what is said from the source, not from what is commentated, and come up with a belief on our own. And somebody said, I don't know who said this, but the phrase is, I think, therefore I am. I believe that nowadays, because we don't spend the time thinking, which is what meditations has done for me the last 2-3 weeks, instead of I think, therefore I am, in the modern world, because of social media, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, it has now become I watch, therefore I am. Meaning that we don't really know what we believe. We only watch social media or we only watch the news, and therefore we form an opinion on what we believe based upon what other people say. So my question to you, and it's not really a question to answer, but it's rhetorical. How much of what you believe or how much of what I believe have I actually thought deeply about? And my point here that I'm trying to make is, if we're not free in our thinking, we're not free in our actual doing. And I think that that's what meditation has done for me, is it has made me think about why I'm doing things in my life, why I'm responding incorrectly to the drivers on the road, or Soren spilling his chips on the patio, or these things in life that we think we have an opinion about. Is that our opinion, or is that an opinion that we've watched, so therefore we make it our opinion? So you can unpack that any way you want, but this is something that I've been thinking about, and how I don't want what people say on social media or somebody else's opinion to influence what I believe, but for me to think deeply on what I believe, come to a conclusion, and then live according to what I believe, according to that virtue, or according to that philosophy.
So one way that Ryan Holiday has thought about this idea, and something that he's combating against constantly, is the banning of books. Now, granted, because books cause us to think. Books cause us to see things from a different perspective, and in a way that video and multimedia cannot. Books force us to think. And so, for example, I'm not sure if you saw the story, but a year ago or something, I think you actually sent it to me, he was banned from presenting at the Naval Academy in Norfolk, Virginia, right? The Naval Academy in Norfolk, I think. But the reason that he was banned was because he spoke out against the fact that certain books were removed from the library, which were on the Naval Academy's campus. He spoke out against it. I don't know the books that were removed, but he spoke out against it from the perspective of people have a right to read certain concepts. People have a right to read the thoughts of a madman and to come to their own conclusions about a topic. Now, if we're talking about children, yes, there's a certain protection that needs to be in place. For children, I believe that certain topics should not be brought up to a child until they're mature enough to handle it. But once a young person reaches, 16, 17, 18, at that point, there should be no thoughts, essentially, that are off limits. Now, granted, the perceived issue in our current university system is that it's almost the opposite problem of Christianity, where there is a very liberal thought that's presented, and any conservative thoughts that are opposed to that liberal thought are denounced. So it's almost the same thing, where the books are not banned, but thoughts are banned that are contrary to what's being taught in the classroom, when the university should be a place where all different thoughts are being bandied about and thrown around. Like, we're talking about Karl Marx and the idea of socialism and Marxism and communism. Those books should be able to be read and understand that, yes, he makes a lot of good points in the books, but those don't work because of XYZ. And we need books by Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations, which talk about capitalism. And capitalism works because of XYZ, but it's extremely deficient because of ABC. And we need to be able to think about these concepts and read about these concepts. That's a perspective that Ryan Holiday has had on book banning, for example, and not allowing certain concepts to be presented, when I too believe that we need to do everything that we can to look at everything from a different perspective in order to become overall better as a people, to understand people who think from one side, to understand people who think from the other side. I've made it pretty public that I'm a libertarian in my political beliefs. Libertarians are notoriously known, or unnotoriously known, for being very neutral in a lot of the debates. Sure, we may take sides one or the other, but I look at both sides of the issue and I understand why someone would argue one side, or a person would understand or argue the other side. But I think that your point that we need to think, we need to do things that encourage us to form our own opinion, not just look on social media and follow what the pundits are saying. So I'm not going to listen to an extremely liberal voice and applaud that line of thought, but I'm going to open myself up to other lines of thought, which to me is best presented in books. It's not best presented in listening to somebody on social media, for example, because in books, I'm free to have thought, when with social media, it's a good point, I'm told what to think. And I don't like being told what to think. But books are the main way that I can encourage myself to think differently, to look at the world differently, and to encourage myself to become a better person. That's kind of my response to that. Did you have any follow-up thoughts?
It's just been something I've been thinking of, and in the current political scene, you know, you might go into one presidential candidacy and agree with them right off the bat, and then you change the way you're thinking or the way right,
that's
exactly,
okay.
right? So it's just been, I think this has been more of a knowing that in the last 5-10 years since the start of social media, that I've formed beliefs not because I believe them, but because so and so who is respected among a group of people believes this, so therefore I should believe it because they believe it. But then I haven't really thought about, well, why do I really believe that? And also it kind of comes back to religion and Christianity and churches, and knowing that you don't have to believe what you were brought up to believe. And you don't have to live the way that you were brought up to live, if that makes sense. You can, and it's, I think sometimes we feel,
that doesn't mean that it's wrong.
I think sometimes we feel guilty that maybe I'm doing something wrong because my grandfather or my parents or, you know, the people I grew up with, man, they don't believe this, or they believed it when I was a kid, but now they don't believe it now. And kind of goes back to what you said earlier in the episode, was we're human beings. Like, we all, like, whether going back to Trump too, whether you vote for Trump or you were a Biden supporter or whatever political spectrum that you lie on, you are on. I know really good people that are Trump supporters, like legitimately good people, kind, generous. I also know people on the other spectrum who are kind, generous, really good friends, you know. And I think that we're told to believe that because somebody voted for somebody else or believes a certain way, then you should disassociate yourself with that person because they don't believe the way you do. And that's been something I've been thinking about. And it's been spurred because of this book, that I think I might be a little bit wishy-washy in what I think because I haven't sat down and really thought about what I believe. And I have generic beliefs that, of course, are more moral or ethical, but some of the gray areas, I don't think that we look for other people to tell us what we should believe, and we don't sit down and think that I can form my own opinion on this. I don't have to believe what you believe. And if we don't believe in the same thing, we can still be friends. We can still be human beings trying to
Right.
connect with each other. So it's been, like I said, man, this book has probably spurred more thoughts than I thought was ever going to come up with rereading this book. Because the last time I read this book, it was more geared towards how I can behave in my coaching situations or in the people who didn't like me in my current mid 30s or early 30s, how I should just ignore them. But then now you read this book and you realize that I still have a lot of work I got to do on myself and my own thoughts, the thoughts that nobody else will ever know about. I still need to work on those things. I still need to work on becoming the best version of myself. So you know that is in my journal, I think I had written 30 pages because of this book. So 16 or 15 pages front and back because of one book that was only about 150 pages long. And to me, you know that's when you're thinking is when you're, for me, it's when I'm writing. I know that I'm thinking when I write that much, and that's the impact that this book has had on me in the last couple of weeks. Going to what I asked you on Thursday, seeing Marcus Aurelius write through the hardships of his time, through the death of his wife, Faustina, through the death of his closest friends, through his own son, Commodus, him not even upholding to what Marcus Aurelius believed in, he still wrote. And I that's why I think that writing is one of those ways that can help us think. So I ask you the question again, even though I asked you on Thursday, are you going to write more? What do you think? I know you're going to say no, but I just had to ask it.
So I see the value, excuse me, and I see the validity of writing. I don't know. I mean, a lot of these are just quotes, but I wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. That's a lot for me, you know? I see the value of it, and I will continue doing so if possible. But my point, I wanted to make a point about what you said, is that one thing that I've learned is people don't care about your opinion on a topic. All they care about a lot of times, which is the point that you made, is whether or not your opinion aligns with theirs. That's all they
way
care
better
about.
than I could say it.
So
Yeah.
because of that, I have reduce the amount of times that I share my opinion on different topics. So, for example, we have brought up transgender policy. We brought up abortion. We brought up our opinions on Trump, on Biden, on Obama. Like, I have very strong opinions, and I know what I believe about each of these topics. And I'm going to have you, we have discussed this, but have I ever told you my opinion, for example, on abortion or transgender policy or any of the current hot political topics of today? Like, do you remember me ever talking about the reason that I believe a lot of the way that I believe? Do you even know what I believe about some of these topics?
No, I don't think I do, but I do know this about you. I do know this about you, that you're not going to share your opinion even with me, because you already know that about yourself. You know that people don't care about your opinion, although I do care about your opinion. And I do know that we disagree on some things, and we've had we've had conversation years ago that we've had about these things, but we're brothers and we respect each other so much that even if you believed in something that I thought was totally an atrocity, I would still respect you. And I think because you believed it, I would be more open to trying to change how I would interpret what you were trying to say.
But that's not true of most people.
Right.
So for that reason, I do not give my opinion on a lot of these topics. It doesn't mean that I haven't thought them through. You know how my brain works. You know, I've thought through each of these issues, and I have a response for each of them of what I believe and why I believe exactly like to the letter, why I believe what should happen in current policy, but I don't share that opinion because in general, people don't care. People are indifferent to the opinion that a random bald guy who lives in North Carolina who happens to be a sign language interpreter has. Nobody cares. And me giving my opinion can only hurt the work prospects and friendship prospects. And so therefore I don't bring up politics. I don't bring up, opinions on the current issues of the day because it doesn't matter. Because if I give them, like, let's say that I'm watching Eli play soccer and I'm on the side of the soccer field, there are people who will make statements pro and anti-Trump on both sides. And I'll laugh at it. They'll say something like, that was a great shot. You're just the best ever. Oh, and I'll be like, ho, 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 that was so funny. And then on the opposite side, I'll be like, somebody would be like, that was the rudest person in the world. They're complete and utter, jerk. That's just like Trump. They're just following Trump's example. And I'm like, ha, 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 ha. Right? I don't say my opinion on the topic because on either side, they don't care what I think about Trump. And some people may say, oh, you're wishy-washy. No, because if I state my opinion, well, then all of a sudden I'm putting our potential for connection in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for me to risk losing this relationship and this friendship because I don't know people as well as we know each other. And I have people that I enjoy being friends with and I enjoy interacting that if I stated my opinion on a topic, they're going to make a judgment call based on the current political thought and the way that what you just said, oh, you believe that? Oh, you like Trump? And I'm not saying that I do, because I don't give my political opinion. Oh, you like Trump? You voted for him? You believe that what he's doing in Iran is right? Oh, I'm not going to talk to you anymore. In fact, I'm going to sit on the opposite side of the soccer line of parents, or vice versa. Oh, you don't like Trump? Well, who are you to suggest that the greatest president in our history who's accomplished so much for, you know what I mean? So I don't give my opinion about it because it doesn't matter. But that doesn't mean that I don't know exactly what I believe about these topics. And me and you, we can talk about it like offline. I'm more than happy if you, and I think the reason we haven't talked about it is because it doesn't relate to you in any way. Like the current American political discourse is not something that you're concerned about living in Germany. When if you brought up German issues, which I'm reasonably discoursed on, like I'm reasonably aware of what's going on in Germany currently. For instance, there was a story that I read last night about the fact that America's thinking about withdrawing 5,000 troops from Germany. They're going to leave 30,000 troops, but there's going to be a general build down of the American troop presence within Germany. And I was curious what you thought about that and how that might affect you and your job. But point being, and I develop my own opinion on that, but I don't give my opinion in general to people because I don't want it to influence the relationship that I have with them. And me stating my opinion will do nothing to improve our relationship. It only creates division, unfortunately, with most people rather than bring us closer together.
Yeah,
I would have
that's
to say.
good stuff. I got one more thing that we have not discussed that's pretty prominent in meditations. Death.
What's that?
Death is around the corner. And it's funny because Marcus Aurelius lived to be 58. I think he was I think he was 58. He always talks about life's brevity, and I have nothing written on this other than like death is around the corner. Have you thought about death for yourself, and does it scare you? Like, have you thought about it? And when he referenced the brevity of life, living in the present, approaching death with no fear, what thoughts did that bring up in you?
One of the most interesting phrases that he talked about was, why do I care about other people's opinions? Why am I concerned for fame? Why am I concerned for power? Why am I concerned for influence? Because the people who will clap their hands at me now either A, won't care after I'm dead, or B, they're going to die soon after I do anyway. And my posterity isn't going to matter. Like in 1,000 years, the brevity of life is such that nobody's going to remember who I am. So why does it matter what other people think what other people say about me now. That doesn't mean that I don't need to be a good person, but if someone falsely accuses me or is trying to tear me down because they want more work than I do, like whatever, why should I care about that? Because life is so short anyway. That's related to the book. I thought that was ingenious. It made me re-look at my interactions with other people and understand none of it matters. Like we're all here for a short period of time, and even the Bible talks about that. Like life is a breath. So why do I get all worked up about stuff? Because we're all going to be gone. Like we're not going to be here. The people that we're trying to impress or not impress or whatever, they're not going to be here. Why is it so important that I get all worked up about this, that, or the other? The second thing is I have struggled with mental health issues for a long time. I'm doing very, very well now, but it is something that I've struggled with in the past, to the point that if you take meditations to the extreme, he's very much from the perspective of what's the point? Like life is short. There's no purpose in life. There's no point to life. We don't need to impress anybody. If we don't care about pleasure or joy or happiness or consciousness, living in the experience, well, why not end it all just right now? We don't have to deal with all these issues. If we're not here, our life doesn't matter anyway. In 1,000 years, nobody's going to remember us. Nobody cares. So why do we need to live this life? Why do we need to bother? And that's something that I have struggled with in the past. I'm not struggling with now. And I talked to Megan this week. We talked about this idea of death and how so many people are scared of it. And we talked last week I can't remember if it was Can't Hurt Me or what the book was, where I said that, no, it was Project Hail Mary, where would I give my life for my family? And I would not hesitate in a second to die for those that I love. I have no problem stepping in front of a bullet because I don't care if I die. Like I don't care. I made the statement to Megan this week in reference to this topic. I want to make it at least until Eli is 18. Just because I want to be an influence in his life until 18, understanding that, yes, I will continue, hopefully, to be an influence in his life after he's 18, going through college and in adulthood. But the most important years of his life are from now at the age of 11 for the next 7 years until he's 18. That's where I can have the greatest influence, spend the most time, make the best memories, all of that, selfishly so, have the most influence and impact on his life. I want to make it to at least 18. After he's 18, if I die, I die. Like that's kind of the perspective that I have now. That doesn't mean that I'm scared of death or I don't want to, I don't obviously don't ever want to die, but I have the opinion of I hope that I make it for 7 more years. And then after that point, it's only a bonus. I have a phrase that I want to end off on, and I didn't know if there was a phrase or something to end off on that you had that was really related to the book, but the whole point, Marcus Aurelius wrote, is to live a good life. We have the potential for it. If we can learn to be indifferent to what makes no difference. And that phrase kind of sums up Stoicism to me. There are so many things in life that we could get upset about, financial worries, whether or not our child will get into a specific college, and that will determine their future, worrying about what friends think about us, if this person's willing to be friends with me or not, am I going to be accepted into this group or not? Like none of that makes no difference in my life as a whole. So if I can learn to be indifferent to the things that make no difference, then I can be assured that I'm going to live a good life. And to me, that phrase really encompassed the whole book. I will definitely be reading it again on down the road. We have other books that we want to read. But did you have any closing thoughts on Stoicism and the book in general?
Other than when he talked, this is by Alexander Pope, he said whatever is right. And to me, just the simplicity of that phrase, this is my life is, and it's okay. Like it's right. And he goes on to talk about, I think it was in book 7.54, how he said, everywhere at each moment, you have the option. 1, to accept this event with humility. to treat this person as he should be treated, and then to approach this thought with care so that nothing irrational creeps in. Meaning, I guess not second guessing yourself or second guessing what is. And this is definitely on a to read once a year, and it's such an easy read. Like you could literally read this in a really quick setting, or instead of scrolling on your phone while you're using the restroom, you could read Meditations. But it was impactful, and I think this conversation has one that I've been wanting to have with you for years, because the depthness of the conversation, not the deathness, but the depthness of conversation, because these are some thoughts that I feel like I'm weird to think about, like it's just the topics that we've talked about.
It shouldn't be weird.
Right, but
it shouldn't be
any
weird.
other person, some of these these topics are like, man, what are you talking about death for? You're weird. Let's talk about life. Let's talk about living in the moment.
Right.
But
right.
when you break it down to the reality of this life, it is to accept what I have with humility. It is to treat those people with how they should be treated. I should let them and let me decide how I'm going to control my attitude and reaction to them. And then again, going back to thinking, I want to approach these thoughts with care so that I'm not delusional. And so I think Meditations gives us that. I think having a conversation that is truthful and vulnerable is necessary. And I don't care who listens to this episode, but this conversation is one that I'm glad I had with you, because it meant a lot to talk about the themes that we talked about. Because I think when you boil down life, these are the conversations that you should be having with those closest to you. And I'm really thankful that we read this book together, and it was impactful. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, it's 170 pages. You don't even have to read the historical narrative that Gregory Hayes presents. It's interesting, the historical narrative, and even the foreword by Ron Holiday, like great. I don't know, it's like 5 pages long, but you skip all that. Start on page 1 of Meditations. It's 170 pages in this book. The whole book, I mean, it's 240 pages or something.
You can start,
but 170 pages.
In the book, you know what I mean? Like wherever you start, you're going to get something.
Yeah,
from it.
definitely worth. Now, the next book that we're going to be reading, I think it's the next book.
Yeah, it comes in the mail on Tuesday.
Is okay. It's a lot longer than 170 pages.
Looks like I'm going to be reading a lot. That's good. It's good.
Well, so we need to, and it's like detailed too, man. One thing that I love about the copy that I ordered, I don't know if all the copies are like this. It's 430 pages long. 430. But in the book, he leaves lots of room on the sides. It's almost like those Bibles that we grew up with, where you could write notes in on the side, But I mean, I started reading it this morning, and this is not a statement in support or against. This is a powerful book.
Which is why it's banned in prisons, right? Talking about the freedom of thought, right? And what books can give you for your thought process.
So I think I heard Ryan Holiday say that it's banned in some prisons, but then I was listening to a podcast. Yeah,
he said it too. Robert Greene said it was banned in prisons.
Okay, because I thought I heard somebody say in that podcast that's one of the fake narratives that it's banned in prisons, and that's one of the reasons why people are so attracted to it. They're like, it's banned in prisons. Right. I have to read it then if that's the case. I'm assuming that it's true, that it's banned I'm sure it's banned in some prisons, because prison libraries are very curated. So I'm sure that it is in some, but I think that's also a law of power that people have used in order to attract people to read this book. But he said in the podcast, which was recorded recently, this book has sold over 10 million copies, 430 pages long. I've already started reading it. There are some extremely controversial laws that I would say almost contradict Meditations in some ways, but contradict them from the perspective of, I'm not saying that this is the justice. This is not being nice to your fellow person, but the reality that power is what it is. We can either have it or we cannot have it. And if you choose not to take power, then another person who's not as just or right as you are will take it. So therefore, you have to manipulate. You have to approach situations from a certain perspective in order for power to be in the right hands. So I'm really looking forward to reading this. We might need to talk about whether or not we want to institute another book before we read this,
I was
or
thinking
maybe reading. So, because Rich Dad Poor Dad is an extremely quick read. I mean, just looking at it now, it is 191 pages long, it looks like. Oh, there's an epilogue, so it's it's about 200 pages long. But this is super quick, super easy. There's lots of like pictures and diagrams in it. The letters are a lot bigger. So we may want to kind of read these hand in hand, but use this one as the next book that we talk about in the podcast that gives us a little extra time to read this at the same time and then to do the 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah, let's do that.
Or what do you think about that?
Yeah, let's do that. That sounds good.
So that'll give us 4 weeks essentially to read this, and then that'll give us. And we I don't know if we can record next weekend or not, but that'll give us. This I can buzz through this super easy because it's super interesting. He's Robert Kiyosaki is a great storyteller. I don't agree with everything that he says, but he's a great storyteller. Presents a great perspective in this book. So, Rich Dad Poor Dad will be the next episode, and then after that, it's going to be 48 Laws of Power, and then after that. Remind me, what's the next book?
Man, I don't know.
I forgot.
I don't know.
We're reading the book, the new
Jim
book
Collins.
by
Something. Yeah.
Jim Collins.
How
to live your life.
What is a good
what's
life
the
or
purpose
something
of
like
life,
that? Yeah,
or
something.
what is a good life? Which is one that we talked about and we would like to read because it's a new book. Heard the podcast episode on the art of manliness about that, which was excellent. So really good. And we have some thoughts about Jim Collins and what we think about his books. So we'll talk about that on that episode. And then following that up is going to be The Simple Path to Wealth
by Jim Collins. Yep.
After that. And then by J.L. Collins, right? So, and we haven't decided what we're reading after that, but we have a excellent lineup. Super excited about it.
Nope.
Any closing thoughts before we end off this episode?
Good stuff.
Good stuff. All right. Until the next episode. We'll see you then.